मेरा सवाल पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर को लेकर है। कश्मीर से धारा 370 खत्म होने के बाद ये माना जा रहा है कि सरकार का फोकस पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर को वापस लेने के लिए हो गया है। क्या डिप्लोमेटिक चैनल के जरिए सरकार प्रयास करेगी पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर को वापस लेने के लिए, क्योंकि आपके कलीग गृह मंत्री भी कह चुके हैं कि अब पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर पर ही होगी, तो क्या हमारा ये शिफ्ट हो गया है?
सर, पाकिस्तान में पिछले 2 दिन से हिंदू सिंधियों के मंदिरों पे अटैक किए जा रहे हैं। कल एक सिंधी लड़की का वहाँ पे मर्डर हो गया और काफ़ी तोड़फोड़ मंदिरों में की जा रही है, काफ़ी मीडिया में भी आया है। भारत सरकार ने इस बहुत ही करंट इशू को किस संज्ञान में लिया?
थैंक यू। परीक्षित,
regarding Pakistan, minorities in Pakistan, I think the numbers which, if you, this is not a new thing. I mean, here is a country which today is waxing eloquent about other nations. I mean, look at their treatment of minorities. I think the minority numbers have come down dramatically in the last 70 years. I think to a point where they probably don't even put it out publicly anymore. And what is happening now in Sindh, I mean, that's not the only thing which has happened in the last 100 days. You had also those cases of abductions of those Sikh girls. So there is a continuing story, and it's pretty pervasive in that country. And I think if there is today really a human rights audit, objective human rights audit in this part of the world, I can pretty confidently assert who will come last in it. Part of the problem with Pakistan is it's been only doing talking. It's not been doing anything on terrorism. That they think that nice words are a sort of answer to the real problem, and the real problem is the dismantlement of this industry that they have created. So the question is not today, whether what can you talk about. At the end of the day, it goes back to what I told you, which is for any neighbor, and this is not a India issue. I mean, show me a country in the world which will accept that its neighbor can conduct terrorism and then it will go and talk to the neighbor. So our position is completely normal, rational. They are the set of people whose behavior is an aberration. The abnormality is there. So I think our position cannot be clearer than what I have spelled out earlier. And on POK, yes, our position on POK has always been and will always be very clear. POK is part of India, and we expect one day that it will we will have the jurisdiction, physical jurisdiction over it. On your, somebody asked a question there, Kashmir and international image. I think the international community understands by and large what our objectives were in modifying Article 370. I think as you explained to them that this was a temporary provision, which is not something which often, I don't see that word used so often in the analysis of events. But when you tell people, look, this is the history of Article 370, that it was a temporary provision. The meaning of the word temporary is that it has to come to an end. That this provision had actually become dysfunctional. That it was being arbitraged by a narrow set of people for their own gains. And that by doing that, they were impeding development. And that lack of development was feeding a sense of separatism, and that separatism actually has been utilized by Pakistan to carry out cross-border terrorism. I think most people do understand that flow of logic out there. And if you pose to them this question that, look, here's an incoming government. An incoming government, what does it do? It has two choices. Either it continues the policies of the last 30 odd years, and the casualties, the costs of all of that. So we know what didn't work for 30 years. So choice one is what did not work should be continued for the future. Or choice two is try and do something very differently. and to try to change the landscape and find actually more effective answers for what is a very challenging situation. And again, if you put all of this, and they are well aware of the cross-border terrorism. I mean, there is today no country in the world which says that is not happening. So my own sense is that there is a growing understanding of what the logic of doing all of this is about. Regarding UNGA, whether there will be a meeting between the leaders of India and Pakistan. I mean, in principle, I don't comment on what can happen, and I'm not talking of this particular issue. But you saw me answer questions on China and even on the US on this matter. But I think just before you ask me that question, since you've asked that question, just look at the climate of relations right now. I think that itself should give you the answer that you are looking at. Diplomacy is largely, not exclusively, an intergovernmental exercise. Okay, so most of the people I deal with directly are people in the government. So that was broadly what I was referring to out there. Having said that, of course, I mean, we all know how important press is, including press of other countries. So now, in terms of how the reporting is going, look, people are entitled to have views. Someone like me is entitled to have views on their views. And I've noticed two things. One point I made earlier, that I have very rarely seen a story from anybody which brings out the fact that 370 was a temporary provision of the Constitution. In fact, it's interesting. I mean, all of you need to Google this and see, how many people actually have reported that. Because somewhere that is at the heart of the issue. Similarly, it's made out sometimes as though we did something on August 5th which terribly complicated a situation, with the assumption that things were normal and happy before August 5th. Now, you all know the situation in Jammu and Kashmir before August 5th. And I mean, yesterday before the Honorable Supreme Court, I mean, government laid out the situation with very graphic and very disturbing numbers. So, I think people, I don't want to make this sound like a criticism, but my observation as a very avid follower and reader of the media would be that, it would be fair to take some of these facts into account. If you're reporting something very serious, to do the necessary diligence for that. Not make sweeping judgments necessarily based on what is a momentary impression